Peace and love. My name is Devine Carama. I am the director of One Lexington, and I would consider myself a dedicated violence prevention advocate.
Whoa. And an Emmy Award-winning musician, my man.
I got a few bars. I
look forward to hearing them. And I'm Sam Stockley, a former professional footballer, coach, and now I'm very fortunate to be the sporting director at Lexington Sporting Club.
That's what's up, man. Glad to be here with you too, man. Glad to be here with you, brother. But we got to take a hard look in the mirror, right? When it comes to domestic violence, it is clear we can't keep expecting women to solve the problem. I mean, that's a bit like asking people of color to solve racism. Men are victims of domestic violence, but the vast majority of survivors are women. Men's abuse of women has different dynamics. The abuse is overall more severe, oftentimes fatal. The societal response, the impact is different. I just think it's time for men to step up and address the issue.
I totally agree, Devine. We want to pull back the curtain and create a space where we as men can finally talk about the most pressing issues facing our communities with mindfulness, open heart, and a lot of respect, okay? It's about talking honestly, listening intently, and getting real and doing the work we need to do to challenge this.
That's what it's about, man. I'm excited.
Yes.
This series is produced for the city of Lexington's It's Time initiative. It's called the Good Guy Guide.
The Good Guy Guide?
Not because we're the perfect examples of good guys, but I just feel like, we got to be clear. But I feel like if we wake up every day and try to be the best version of ourselves, that's what being a good guy is about, right?
All you can do and all we try to do, It's all I've learned to try and do as well. So whether you're here to learn, to reflect, or to join the conversation, we welcome you, open-hearted, right? We're here together, striving to do better for ourselves, our families, and the community.
That's what it's about. Welcome to the Good Guy Guide. Let's get it started, my brother. Peace and love. Welcome back to the Good Guy Guide. I'm excited to have my brother Sam back in the studio. How you doing, bro?
I'm excited to be back. I've been watching, I've been listening, should I say, and doing some fantastic work with it all, so excited to get rolling in this one.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. Well, look, we got a great guest today, somebody I've known for a while, Carlos Aquilar, who is an instructional coach at Fayette County Public Schools, but his work extends way beyond the school system as he does a lot of great work in the community as well.
Carlos, lovely to meet you. I'm looking forward to talking to you about your actions and what you're doing inside your school, so I'm sure I'll learn some more today, so I appreciate it.
And well, look, speaking of actions, right? When we talk about this work of just being better people, it's not just about our intentions, it is about the actions, right? So I got a tough question to start off with. Why are you looking at me like that? Because you know I'm coming with a heater, right?
Yeah.
When you first kind of became aware of your male privilege, how did you start to make adjustments and changes in your life, especially in the context of your significant other or your family?
So for me, the expression male privilege, it's a bit loaded because your father is supposed to be that example of what a male is, right? So for me, I didn't have the most positive influence when it came to that. I didn't have a protector, someone that nurtures and loves you. I had the opposite. I had someone that destroyed, harmed. So male and being a man, for a large part of my life, I did reject those attributes. I was still he, him, pronoun-wise. But the stereotypical nature of what a guy was, what the world was telling me to do, I rejected because of the destruction that my father had caused in my home. So what was supposed to be a privilege, there was that rejection and that internal conflict of, this is my example. Are all men like this, right? So it's not until recently where I've been able to claim that identity and feel good about it, especially becoming a father myself. So definitely when I got married, your spouse has their own expectations and then their own lived experiences. So, our voice was one. Then my wife was like, look, if I'm talking to you, you're gonna have to not respond in an elevated voice, because our voice is there for a reason, right? And if it comes out harmful, then it's not doing its purpose, right? Our voice is supposed to calm and protect, not harm. So that's something that within my own relationship, my wife had to check me. And we had that, like, I met her, I was 10 years old. I've known her more than I haven't. So we've had that relationship where we've grown up together.
So friends first, almost. So that trust was already there.
Yeah. She was a PK, a pastor's kid.
Okay.
So I had to live by the word, do everything the right way. So, I think when I think of male privilege, and I think about it in my relationship, the first thing that pops in my head is what comes out of my mouth, my voice, the words that I use, and the impact that has for my spouse, for my children, and even in the classroom, right? If I'm like, raise your hand, it's different than if I'm like, raise y'all's hand, like,
right.
It's
There's
a different,
that teacher voice.
it's a different, the kids react to it differently when it comes from a voice from like a man.
So go ahead, Sam. Please.
No, first and foremost, thank you for opening up. One thing I've learned through my life and my career, just on what you're saying, is I truly believe that words are the most powerful performance enhancers in everything that you do. And hearing you say that about it is it's amazing how it sort of just connected a dot with me, because I often say that when, in my world, if we're talking to players or we're bringing players in or young players or release or however, all the different things that we have to go through, just in that part of my life, the words that we choose and the words that we use and how we use them are absolutely so critical. And that's not something that I'm an expert of at all in any way whatsoever, but I try my best to always be impeccable with your words, because they're so important. And I was just hearing that.
Yeah, the power of words. I'm sitting here listening to both of you, and even the way I kind of framed the question. I know for me, obviously being a person of color as well, it took me a long time before I was aware of my male privilege, which I definitely have, and had it way before I realized it. But I think part of it, just to start from the foundation, if you don't mind, is I think I was in deficit in so many areas socially in my life that when you're always feeling like you're playing catch up, when you feel like you're even a victim sometimes in society, you're trying to catch up, constantly prove yourself, show that you are valued, show that you are equal, that you don't even really self-analyze yet. And so I think a lot of my early years, if you said male privilege, I couldn't conceptualize. I wouldn't even know what you're talking about, right? Because for me, how could I have privilege, right? So I think I probably was dealing with what a lot of men suffer from, which is just not acknowledging their male presence. But then also I was in deficit for sure. So early in my life, I didn't even think about it. Before I kind of go into my journey, because it's kind of extensive, right? I do want to pivot back to you and then back to you, Sam, and I want some tangible ways, guys, that you have done the work since acknowledging that male privilege, right? And you did talk about your voice, but what are some actual things, behaviors that shifted, mindsets that adjusted and changed once you realized it?
The one thing that pops into my head, I had the opportunity to study abroad in Brazil.
Okay.
And we were with this cohort. We went to this party. It was a house party. Well, all the parties were house parties over there. But there was this young lady who was drinking a lot, right? She just kept drinking. This dude was buying her drinks, and she was accepting the drinks. And as a guy, I already know what that's code for, right? If I'm buying you drinks, then there's an expectation there. So for me, I was already seeing where the things were gonna go sideways. So with her, I was keeping an eye on her, right? I was then I was gonna propose to my wife. That's why we went anyways over there. I told her we were studying abroad, but I went to propose. But I kept my eye on her, and eventually the writing was on the wall. The guy came and was trying to take her. And I was like, no, you ain't doing that. So right there, I feel like another person would have probably not stopped that, because God knows what would have happened.
Yeah.
Right? Is this girl studying abroad? And my mind went automatically to, he's going to take advantage of her. She can't consent to what's going to happen. So that's my action. Anywhere I am where there's female identifying, femme identifying relatives, I have like that spidey sense where I'm, looking out for them. My wife is always like, stop, you're not Principal Carlos, you're not the teacher. But I'm like, I can't, because once you're aware, once you learn something, like you can't go back, right? So that's, when you ask me that question, that's where my mind automatically goes. And it does come with consequences, right? Anytime you do a courageous action, you got to be ready for the consequence.
That, so. and I would even say, not to challenge, because I know you personally, so I know what other work you've done too. But before we get to Sam, I think one thing to challenge us all is the actions can't just be in protection of women, right? A lot of times that action starts within. Yeah. Because a lot of times we are falling into those same toxic characteristics and thinking that the way to not show my male privilege is to protect, right? Because I'm the big, strong protector, right? But I know it really starts within. And we got some time to dive into that a little bit. But what about you, Sam? What's some tangible things that you kind of shifted or changed when it came to your mentality or just specific actions in regards to being aware of your male privilege?
I think it's funny when you say that. I know that we spoke about it, sort of offset a little bit about that word, and for me, I know a little bit of your background because we've done this now for a time, and first time I've met you and hearing about your background with your father and how that was, I can almost flip it a little bit, and I spoke about it in previous sort of podcasts. Really, there was no male figure in my house. So there was no thought of male privilege. I don't think I ever grew up with it or understood, and it's only now, later in life, I'm 46 now, that I'm probably really understanding, and it's when my wife or when my daughter will highlight the male privilege aspect of it. So from that side of it, the privilege, I didn't think that I was privileged in any way whatsoever. I thought I was fighting, I was striving, I was having to do what I needed to do to try and make it, and that for me was football. So, and then when I went into football at a very young age, not having that grounding of any type of father who was my coaches, and I was lucky to go into a really good program in the academy, everything was about then the privilege of being in there. You'd be training, and if you're not training right, there's another 100 kids that would want to be in here, that 100 players that are as good as you that could be. So I never really identified with privilege in that respect, and I'm sort of going around the houses a little bit to say what I've realised now in my younger ages, and I think my wife would say this. I think the actions that I've learned is whenever I've made a mistake or I've done something wrong, I would flip that back into maybe saying about my past, or I never had that, or I've never had that grounding, and maybe hid behind some of those aspects of what my dad went around. So if he wanted, I didn't have this, that, and then I would flip it and try and push it onto her. And that was a real learning curve of actually my wife turning back round and saying to me, hold on a minute, this is what you're doing, this is about you and what you've done, or something, the mistake that you've done, or something that's happened, or whatever, and you're actually flipping it and making it about me. That's not cool at all. So that was a real learning curve in a relationship, to then to be able to understand, actually, no, what am I doing it? Like, no, this is about me, this is about the action that I've just done, or something that's happened, and I've got to take responsibility for that. And then I've got to be able to apologize for that in the right way, in a sincere way, from the heart, and not just an apology that didn't really mean anything. Yeah. If that makes sense.
It does. And I think my upbringing is a little bit different than you all's, because, my father was there. He was present. We weren't close, but I mentioned before, he was a great model. of just what a man, a future, as I'm looking at him, a future father, what I strive to be. He was a good model. But I think for me, and I've made it through several episodes and I ain't cried yet. Today's not gonna be the day. I'm put that out there. But I think what really made me identify my male privilege was a conversation with my late daughter. Kamaria, she passed away in 2020, but when she was about 14 or 15 years old, she said something to me that shifted my whole perspective and really highlighted this privilege that I've had for a long time and didn't realize. And anybody who knows me, if you see me with my kids, I'm super affectionate. Like, I'm with that, period. Like, when I see you, I'm hugging you. I hug. That's just the type of person I am, right? And her sister, Jada, was very affectionate like me, but Kamaria was not like that. So I would always try to hug and kiss her. She kind of pushed me away. Like, it's all good, you know what I mean? Then it kind of became a joke for a few years, and then, she got a little bit older. And so one day, I asked her, I said, hey, we good? She's like, yeah. Why would you ask me that? I said, well, every time, Dad tries to give you a hug, kiss you on the cheek or whatever, you're always pushing me away. And she looked at me and she said, and she was a little bit more developed than girls her age. And she looked at me and she said, because you are the only man that when I tell you not to touch me and stop, you do it. Because when I go to school and the boys touch me and they grab me and I tell them to stop, they think it's a joke. Mm-hmm. And they won't stop. But I know if I tell you to stop, you'll stop. So it wasn't that she didn't want me to. It was the fact that she found peace and solace in the fact that this is a man, the first man in my life, that when I tell him not to touch me, he actually listens to me. And it broke my heart. But it let me know what kind of privilege that I have, right? And then I start researching. Because now my heart is wide open. Yeah. So now I'm talking to my mom. I'm telling her the story. She said, son, the stuff I had to endure, that's just what women had to deal with. I'm like, what you talking about, right? So now I'm learning from her. Now I'm listening, which is the biggest thing that we hear, right? From our wives, our daughters, is if we could listen more, right? So now I'm listening and I'm starting to understand the plight of women in this country, things that they've had to endure, things that we take for granted, situations, spaces we just take for granted, that they seem to be on the negative end of. And I think for me, that opened me up to this privilege that I have. It didn't change my battles with racism. Mm-hmm. It didn't change my other battles. I'm still fighting those battles, but simultaneously, I got to realize this privilege I have and what am I going to do to make sure my wife, my daughters, the women I come in contact and work with aren't victims, right, to that. So I want to go a little bit deeper into, it's almost the same question, but I want us to dig even deeper, right? Because you mentioned something. You started to go there with our families, our significant others. Let's stick and stay there, right? There are certain privileges in society that we have that our wives, right, that our girlfriends of the past don't have, right? So what are you doing within your home, fellas? What actions are you doing? What things have changed? What light bulbs have kind of turned on over the years within your own household?
This is a really interesting, it's an amazing topic, and it's a topic that I'm uncomfortable, not because I'm uncomfortable with the topic, because it's unfamiliar to me, because I think maybe some of the stuff that I've had in the past might have been unconscious and not knowing, and as I said, that's been brought to light with maybe the way I would act in a situation or something like that. Sure. But I don't see it in my household, because it's such an open, so maybe I'm answering it in a way that we have such an open household. Yeah. And we have those conversations, and you was here a couple of weeks ago with my daughter when I can pop off, but I will always go back, and which isn't right. So maybe that's a privilege in some respect. I'm not sure that I can I've maybe had a bad day, I'm stressed, I'll come in, something will happen, I'll pop off, and I won't ever leave it. I'll immediately recognize that, and then I'll go in and I'll address that situation and say, I'm extremely sorry for being like that. I shouldn't have raised but I shouldn't have said that you weren't doing what you were doing, or this, that, and the other, because actually that was on me. So like, we have that open.
You already kind of
we have it, like, yeah, and that's where my wife's extremely strong in that, and wouldn't have it any other way. So
she ain't having that.
No, not having it in any way. And my boy's grown up in that, so I feel like I'm hoping that the generation it stopped, and they do feel completely equal and open with it. I know there's been a big history of it before, but I think I tried to in our household, and you might get a different question, that it's together, right?
That's right.
It's together. It's a family.
Yeah.
We're going through it together, and we're trying to work things out together. And I know not everybody has that, and I've been not that everybody that's had that. So yeah, like I said,
I give you a prime example, because I see what you're saying, and I think for the most part in my household it is like that, but then every once in a while there'll be a situation that'll check me. You know what I mean? So prime example, and I've been open about this. When my daughter passed away, I didn't want to have any more kids because there was a fear associated with parenting.
Yeah.
Doing it all over again, I don't want to lose another one. Like, there's all these things, right? But me and my wife, we prayed about it. We got to a space where we finally said, okay, we're going to have a child, right? And so here I am, 43 years old, starting all over, okay? But one thing I realized, my wife is a working woman, right? And loves to work. And she out in the community too. Like, we used to have this thing that used to frustrate her. We would go places and they would be like, oh, you're Devine's wife. And she'd be like, no, I'm Sierra Spalding.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, no, you know what I mean? Yeah. He's Sierra's husband. You know what I mean? Like, and so there was this interesting dynamic when the baby started going to daycare. Because, you know, I work crazy hours, put in a lot of work. I come home, I'm tired. But guess who else goes to work and puts in crazy hours and comes home tired? But there was this expectation that when we both got home, you got the baby.
Yeah.
What I look like, you know what I mean? Like, just in my head, like, look, you already do something I can't do, right? You feed her, you know what I mean? Ain't no milk coming out of this, right? And so it was kind of this thing where it was expected that she had to take care of the kids and cook dinner and do all of these things. Hold up. We both working. You know, so when I talk about male privilege, even though I'm trying my best to do things the right way, like you all say, every once in a while I'm checked in understanding that even in trying my best to do things the right way, sometimes my privilege is shining through. And it was going like that for the first few weeks until I seen her literally crashing. And I'm like, babe, you okay? You know, what do you need? And she basically was like, look, I mean, I'm working a full-time job too. And then I got to come home, and now look, I can't cook a lick. Babe, unless you want hamburger helper. But what I could do is, hey, let's DoorDash for a couple nights. Maybe I can get in there and try to whip something up, right? I got the dishes. I got Carson. Let me make sure she getting her homework done and X, Y, Z. Or let me get the baby for a while. You go and rest, right? So that was a prime example of, even in the evolved version of me, I kind of saw where my male privilege was kind of seeping through and didn't even realize it. Have you all, maybe in the past or presently, kind of stumbled across situations like that where there's almost kind of this kind of maybe unconscious expectation that your wife is supposed to do this because she the wife? Shit, y'all better than I was,
I mean,
man.
for me, like, since I've known that society expects that, like, we ungendered our roles. Okay. And then we do it based on abilities. Yeah. I just happen to be able to fix stuff, so I'm the one that fixes stuff when it
Not
breaks.
just because you the man, just because that's what you do.
Fix.
Yeah.
She's into woodworking, so she's in the garage building stuff. But it's interesting. Your story made me think of, I'm the dad. I don't babysit my kid. right? I hate when people say that, oh, your baby, and you're the dad. I'm like, no,
Come on.
that's my child.
That's right.
Right?
Come on.
And when we go to restaurants, like we have a 2-year-old, he'll do number 2. That's the one where we like keep tally. Sometimes I'm like, nah, it's your turn. Like I did it. But it's unfortunate because in society, like more times than not, I'll take him to the bathroom.
Yeah.
And that little koala thing is not there. So what do? I put him on the sink, and that's what. And other dudes are using the urinal. I'm like, no, society should let me be a dad 24/7. Just like y'all got a koala little changing table.
That's right.
In her bathroom. Since you don't got one here, I might put some things on the sink, and y'all are gonna have to complain until we get one everywhere.
So even as you're doing the work, sometimes society isn't doing the work.
Yeah.
So me and you need a patent that.
Yeah.
Get paid out here.
Daddy koala. Yeah.
Daddy koala. Oh. Just saying. 60-40?
No. 10. You get 10. I get 90.
Drives hard bargain there, mate.
I'll take that.
Nah, but I also have the blessing of raising 2 black boys. My wife is Dominican, so they're a little bit more chocolate than I am. And I already know society's expectations. So with my kid, like, he'll see things on the TV. And he's like, Papi, can I play with dolls too? I'm like, why not? So I let him do what he wants. He's very artistic. So the arts, he's into the arts. And there's no expectation like what I had back in the day. Right? I feel like a lot of my healing is happening through them. Because I really feel like when things happen to us, we have 2 choices. Like, we either live long enough to become the thing that harmed us, or we take that and make purpose and blessings and healings from it. So when we talk about male privilege, in order to do that, we have to know it's there, like that awareness, the listening to our spouses. Right? Listening to the other relatives we have around, like, and them being able to check us, right? Because my wife has told me that I get into these modes where she's like, I'm walking around eggshells with you. And to me, that triggers, like, I'm becoming like my dad. And I have his name, right? My son has, and when I was naming him, I was hesitant to name him Carlos because there's been so many Carloses that have been alcoholics. And I'm like, nah, it stops with me. And I'm going to give him that name. And interestingly enough, I call him Ariel. But recently he said, Papi, call me Carlos. I want to be Carlos Ariel. And I'm like, that hit me hard, right? But we need to be aware. And when our wives say, I'm walking on eggshells around you, sitting with those emotions, like in therapy, my therapist uses IFS, interfamily systems, where I sit there, I acknowledge the feelings. Who's at the table? Is it anger, fear? What are they telling you? And then getting control of those feelings and producing something from it. So that's kind of been my actions. And it's taking that space for me to sit with myself and say, who have I been? Have I been in control? Have I allowed anger? Have I allowed fear, anxiety of the future to lead me? Have I been at the driver's seat? Because if we don't, we'll be in autopilot, and that's when harm can happen.
That's when things become routine, right? To that point, Sam, and that's interesting because you said a couple things that stood out to me. Sitting by myself, asking myself questions, therapy, right? All 3 of those things speak to a man or a person looking within and doing the work from the inside out. And it might not always, because you talk about lack of access, you talk about how we were raised, therapy, stigmatized, right? So it might not be that formal. But Sam, can you think of moments in your life where you had those moments of, because you talk about how great you and your wife work together, right? Now, right. So what led to that? What got you to a space where you and your wife do have this great partnership?
We have a phrase called part of me. So parts. So part of me is angry at the minute, or part of me is feeling shame, or part of me is making excuses because I'm scared, or part of me has fear. So, and I'm still learning it. I hear you, and part of me wants to react in this way because this is how I'm feeling, or that's made me feel this way. So part of me, but it's not all of me. And that's how I've been able to sort of manage that. It's not all of me in it. So just by separating yourself from those feelings at times, which is what I'm learning still to try and do and continue to do, and it's an ongoing process, it's enabled me to manage the harder conversations, whatever that might be about. And then actually listen and come to a conclusion at the end of it, rather than it just be I'm out of here, or no chance, I can't listen to this, I got something going on at the minute, I don't need all of those things that we use, and they're just mechanisms, right? They are just mechanisms.
So I want to speak to that, because I'm sitting here smiling, not because what you all are saying is funny, but just to see the amount of personal work that you two put into making sure your marriages are equitable, that it's a true partnership, that you are the best version of yourself, for your family, it inspires me. Hearing you say that reminds me, when you talked about kind of separating it out, one thing I realized about myself, like a lot of men, we're fixers, right?
Yeah.
We want to fix stuff. So I, like with my wife, I couldn't even understand the point of a conversation if we ain't getting to what's the point? Okay, you're doing all this talk, but we got to get to what are we trying to do, right? And that is me just completely being oblivious and diminishing her feelings that are coming out within this conversation because it's not leading somewhere. And it even got to the point where I would get really quiet and not express myself if I didn't feel like she would provide a solution for it. So if I knew it was something that we weren't ready to tackle together, right? But really in my head, I'm like, she ain't gonna do nothing about it. So what's the point of even talking about it? So what happens is I keep it in, and what you said, Sam, it starts to fester, right? So I realized that about myself, and I said, well, wait a minute here. Life can't just be about the only time you communicate is to reach a goal. You know what I mean? That can't be life. It can't be marriage. And I start doing that work, start really analyzing myself. My wife is the complete opposite. She is a talker. She is somebody who I've seen will kind of start to talk before she fully even gets a thought, and will flesh it out in real time. But then there's so many things that are happening while she's fleshing it out that's beautiful. And so I think what I have learned is these conversations, the communication is so important, right? That even if we're not getting to a goal, there's something that's coming out of this. Yeah. Just be quiet, listen. If you got something on your mind, communicate it. It's not her job to fix what your issue is, right? Just talk and communicate. And once we start getting to that space, the argument started to decrease. I was starting to understand my wife, this person who I say is my soulmate, who I've been married to for 6 years. I'm finding new things out about her because I'm listening, truly listening, and she's finding out new things about me. And so that is something that I recently thought about, Sam, hearing you talk about doing the work, right? You start to find things out about yourself. You expose a different part of yourself to your wife, and that's where the partnership continues to grow, right? But here's something I want to do, because you opened up the door earlier, and I thought it was super profound. I want to talk just a little bit, and then we'll get back to us, but I want to talk a little bit about society, the pressures, the norms out there, right? How do you battle that? What do you all see out there from a society standpoint that is kind of reinforcing this male privilege that we have benefited off of and still do, you know, if we're being honest?
I mean, the messages I hear is the world is ours, right? Women are there to be objectified for us, and then that's why we see boys that grab girls in the middle schools and they blur those lines, and they're like, what? This is what I'm supposed to do. Yeah. It's kind of like a rites of passage into manhood in a destructive way, because if I would have followed what society would have told me, I should have slept with as many women as I could, right? Your manhood is based off of that. It's based off of what emotions you don't express anger.
Yeah.
Right? We're supposed to be angry all the time, stronger than the next guy. Yeah, it's not positive. It's very destructive.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I want to end to talk about this next generation. But Sam, what about you? What are you seeing from society? I mean, you've been all over the world, all over the country. As a soccer coach, you've been able to experience a lot of different cultures, different things. What are you seeing out there that's kind of reinforcing this male privilege?
When we grew up in England, okay, women's soccer, women's football was unheard of, really. It was absolutely unheard of. So when I finished playing 15 years ago, 12 odd years ago, I finished over in America. And one of my teammates at the time, great guy, was going out with a captain of the women's soccer team.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Unheard of where in England coming through back then. But then living in America and understanding how actually equal, if not better, the women's soccer over generations has grown and been. It's an equal opportunity over here. My daughter got into it and started playing over here and loving it, but then went back to England. She didn't have those opportunities to be able to play and do it because the society wasn't there. So I've come from a sort of a place where I feel like the generations, I feel like it's, again, as we said before, the privilege, I'm sitting with men of colour, I'm a white guy, so maybe that's a bit of a privilege without even knowing, if that makes sense. But I don't see it in as much in the new generation. Yeah. Maybe that's a completely wrong thing to say, but what we're trying to do, and especially with where we are, is continually drive the equality of it all. And I tried to look at it from that aspect of, are we doing the same for our boys in our youth club as we are for our girls? 100%. Are we doing the opportunities? 100%. So I tried to, I've sort of looked at it in a way where we're trying to cancel out the privilege piece of it all. Does my daughter have opportunities? 100% now. Does my son? Yeah, 100%. I think obviously our generation is probably the different piece to it.
To it. And oddly enough, it is our generation who still run and control a lot of these systems.
That's fair.
A lot of these organizations, right? And so I think we're doing the work. That's clear in this conversation, right? But then when I'm thinking about society, though, there's part of me, and I think we talked about this a couple episodes ago, where I'm like, man, I'm living on a hope and a wish that the rest of society is doing the work that we are doing. And so how do we, and I think conversations, content series like this help, but how are we pushing forward the work that we're doing and making sure that men in our circles and our families and men across the whole world are also committed to doing this work? You had a thought? Yeah.
I not necessarily. I just you got me now. I was just thinking about the scale of that, and I think with anything,
that's what I mean.
One at a time, one person at a time, one boy, one girl at a time, and that's all it can do. And I hope that that we're in these environments now where we, as leaders, which I like to feel like in my role, I hate the word manager and all of that. I feel like I want to be a leader, and I want to lead people into that ability to have for that not to be around, and for not to have that. It's crazy, but it doesn't come into my thought process in anything that I'm doing. I would expect my daughter to have the same opportunities 100%. Now, whether she does or she doesn't is what we're talking about in society.
That's right. But within your household,
my household and around it, 100%. Yeah, 100%.
And that's one of the reasons I do love coming on this show, is because it is inspiring. Because I admit I do the work, but I feel like every other week I realize there's so much more work for me to do, and I'm speaking just for me. Yeah. You know what I mean? That I have to shift narratives that have been poured into my mind for a long time.
Can I ask, Carla? Can I ask you what you think? Because listening to you talk in this space is actually educating me in this space and letting me learn from you in that. How are you articulating it?
So while you were talking, I thought about leadership, because that's where I'm kind of trying to be into, and male privilege plays into that, right? There's more males in leadership roles. So anytime I'm in a room and I'm given access, or I gain access because of my privilege, right? That's one of the things that could help, making sure that when decisions are made, the people that are impacted are at the table. So we're talking about women dress code in the workplace, femme-identifying, women-identifying people need to be present. And if they're not, raising that hand, being ready for the consequence that'll happen when you raise your hand, but doing so, right? I think that's number one. Number two, we've talked about it, being a dad, like we get like 2 weeks parental leave. So society-wide, like that needs to change, because if we can't even father our own kids, it's a done deal, right? Like those opportunities are being taken away from us before we're able to actually do anything about it.
Yeah.
So,
well, and then the other side, you were talking about dress code. Just to get back kind of on the male privilege side, a lot of times dress code are skewed towards women.
Yeah. The little girls in the room.
You know what I mean? Yeah. But what about guys? You know, it seems like when we're talking about dress code, we're always talking about women. I'm just of the belief that there's a lot of men out there that are feeling some of the same things, that have been through some of the same things, and they just don't know how to talk about it. Our goal, hopefully, is to be a model to show them that they can talk about this stuff, and that if they talk about it and deal with it, that they will be better, not just for themselves, but for the people around them. And so I applaud you, brothers. So let's close out with this, okay? Young cats in middle school that you work with, maybe young men that I'm working with in the streets, in the schools, young men that you come across, right? What is our advice to them, right, about being aware of kind of the obvious male privilege, but maybe the privilege that's unconscious, right, that they may not even realize that they have? And what are some tips that we can give to them to kind of manage that so that they can have healthy relationships as they're growing up?
For me, I would tell them we've had teachings. We've just gotten disconnected a little bit. So find that productive man. And the way for you to know who that is look at their actions, right? If they're healing a community, if they're speaking life, that's who you need to be behind, right? Money comes and goes. And depending on how money is earned, if you got to look behind your back 24/7 after you got that money, it's not worth it. So find that mentor in your life that has lived through some things, and then we call them mirrors, right? Surround yourself with mirrors that are productive, because in Spanish we have a saying, dime con quién andas y te diré quién eres. Tell me who you're around and I'll tell you who you are. So who are you around? Who are you becoming? Because what you do day to day, that's going to be you.
Yeah.
So that's what I'll tell them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. That's good. And what they post, right, on social media.
I think,
Sam?
No, I think Carlos has said a lot of it there. I think that we would always try and wrap our young players around good mentors.
Yeah.
I think it's important that we have a responsibility as leaders, that we're providing an environment that has standards. We spoke about before, it has standards, it has serious values, it has expectations and accountability that can all be managed in the right way to be able to let that person or let that player thrive. But also you have to we have to have an open door policy, and that's hard. So you've got to take time, you've got to create relationships, you've got to create that trust. And I think as leaders, you do that in your day-to-day actions, in your daily interactions, in how you manage tough situations. You know, young players, as you said, are always watching that. So I think we try to create that environment where it's safe. Yeah. You have to create a safe environment. and we get in front of it, you're gonna make mistakes.
Yeah.
You're a young man. You're going through changes. You're maybe getting some success. Maybe you're getting some failure. So you're not always going to be able to handle it in the right way. But by putting the time in, by creating the environment, by creating the relationships, then they feel free and able to be able to talk. And when they talk, that's when you got to be able to listen, and that's when you got to be able to have, hopefully, your own life experience. Again, you don't make it about yourself, but you have that ability. Well, you know what? I've been in that situation, and this is what I did, which was the wrong thing to do. So I would recommend, or I would ask you to do this, and go away, and then feedback, and then come back in. So that's how we try and create that space. And I would say that to any young, any young teenage boy, any sort of young 20s boy, like, man, you have as hard as it is, and I'll say this to myself, as hard as it is, have the trust in yourself that it's okay to be vulnerable and find someone that you can talk to, just one person, and pick that right person. And once you do that, then it's up to that relationship, and you create that relationship. I think that's it. I think there isn't any other. There's no book. There's no way. I think you have to experience things as young men in life to guide you. It's just up to us as leaders and mentors and people like that to provide the right shining light to be able to do that. And if they do go off the rails, then you have to be able to have an open heart to be able to help them get back on and understand that, mistakes will happen.
Yeah, and will continue to happen.
What I will say is there's consequences depending on that mistake, obviously.
Yeah, but being prepared for that. And so I would just tell young people that as long as you are being the best version of yourself, continuing to challenge yourself and do the work, that you're going to keep those good people around you. You mentioned it. You are the company you keep. Good company is going to want to be around you if you are continuing to do that work. And so that would be my advice. But I think you all said the rest. Very, very, very good conversation today, fellas. It definitely blessed and helped me. Hopefully it did the same for you. Good job, fellas.
Thank you, my man.
We're gonna figure this. We're gonna figure that out.
Lovely to meet you. It really was. It was amazing listening to your knowledge and your experiences, man.
Yeah.
For having me.
Thank you for joining us for the Good Guy Guide. We hope you gained a new perspective, a call to action, or maybe just a reminder that we all have a role to play in creating a world that is more equitable and kind. Remember, change starts with each of us. So let's continue the conversation, challenge our assumptions, and most importantly, let's be the change that we want to see. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with somebody that needs to hear this message. Tune in next time as we dive even deeper into the issues that matter, bringing you more insight, stories, and inspiring positive action. Good job, fellas.
Done, bud. Fantastic.